Garland is a third-year PhD student in the School of Psychology. She studies in the Child and Comparative Cognition Lab. Her story is a tale about language, animals, adventures, being seven, and real-life fairy tales.
Once upon a time, long ago, there was a mouse who lived in a mitten and her mother who lived in a tree. Oh, wait a minute, I might be getting my characters a little bit mixed up. Actually, this was a mouse. She may look a little bit familiar. That's me. And that's my mother, and she didn't live in trees. She did love them, though. And this is the mitten that we lived in. It's actually the state of Michigan. It's shaped a little bit like a mitten if you look at the outline of the Great Lakes. And we do call it that. And when I was in third grade, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Copeland, used to read us chapter books every day at story time. It was my favorite part of the day. And at one point, she read us a story about a little boy who met a wizard and was granted 3 wishes. Now, I was so fascinated with this idea that I spent probably the rest of third grade thinking about what my wishes would be, instead of pretty much anything else. Number 1 was what I thought should be a priority for anyone, really, at 7 years old, and that was I wanted a magically replenishing mountain of candy. Who wouldn't, you know? Alright. Now, I spent enough of my childhood pretending to be a dog or a cat or a horse that number 2 followed suit. I wanted to be able to change into anything at will. Any person, any animal. Now, I had read enough stories about wishes gone wrong that I knew that changing into rocks was probably a bad idea. And number 3, I thought about this, and I thought, well, it makes sense that if I'm going to spend that much time being animals and other people, I need to know the language, right? So my third wish was to learn every language in the world fluently, including that of animals, like my friend Betty here. Now, my mom gave me a little bit of a head start with number 3, not only by letting me feed Betty, who lived in our backyard, but also by surrounding me in a small menagerie most of my life, and inviting all sorts of foreign friends to stay with us, and taking us traveling whenever she could, which is something that I continue to do here and there a little bit between studies of German language and biology. And which brought me to do research in linguistics and cognition. For example, with 1-year-olds and what they understand about pointing, and with college students' brains and what they do when they listen to nonsense sentences. Now, this eventually led me to New Zealand, where I do similar cognition research, but with birds. Or, as my dad likes to put it, I do the same thing as Dr. Dolittle. Now, the bird that I work with is the New Zealand robin. And how do I do cognition research with them? How do I sit and ask them questions? Surveys don't tend to work very well, and neither does chit-chat over coffee. So, there's a couple of special things about this particular type of bird. It spends most of its time hunting for insects and hiding them in little niches around its territory. It spends a lot of the rest of its time stealing from each other. So these worms and these hiding places are very important to these birds, and that's a behavior you don't see in very many species anywhere in the world. The other important thing is that they're not afraid of us. There really aren't many places on Earth where animals aren't aware that we're pretty nasty predators sometimes. And these little birds don't worry about anything. I can sit there and ask them questions and watch their behavior, and they're not afraid of me eating them at some point. So what do I ask them? Well, about worms, of course. For example, what do you understand about numbers? Well, one question I ask them is whether they can tell more from less. That's a basic question. We've asked it to a lot of different animals. And it turns out that actually they can do it really well. Not only when you show show the worms at the same time, but also if you hide them one at a time, they still remember really accurately. In fact, they do this better than dogs, better than monkeys, better than human infants. Another question I like to ask is, what do they know about addition and subtraction? So for example, if I hide 3 worms and they only find 1, will they notice? Or if I hide 2 worms and they find 2 different kinds of worms in their place, will they notice that? Well, it turns out they do notice. They'll search a lot longer if they find less worms than what you put in. And they get a little bit angry. And sometimes they'll steal my food. That wasn't the plan. But they certainly take notice, and that gave me a pretty clear answer.
He's still down there.
He's stolen my little wig and taken it off in the forest. Another question I ask is, what do they understand about each other? What do they understand about intentions? They spend so much of their time stealing from each other. Would they rather steal from a bird who's not looking than one who is? And if they do that, is it something they would do with humans or other species as well? Well, it turns out that they do. It seems like, from all appearances, they believe that we are large, very badly put together birds, and we want to protect our worms just as much as they do theirs. So they steal from the unsuspecting human who's not looking. In fact, they seem to believe that we see like birds as well, and that we have really good peripheral vision, much better, and they give us much more credit than actually we thought. So, what happened to that little girl? Well,